Here we go. Okay. So my name is Lynn Fitzhugh, and I work for Thurston Climate Action Team, and I'm moderating the panel today. I should say, in total disclosure, that I was the coordinator of 350 Seattle at the time that Shell No was happening. I was also at Abby's trial, and I also held 2 conferences in which we had workshops about the case that Adonis is part of. I'm very familiar with all the different things that were shown in the movie, and that was, as some people have already alluded to, part of the fun part of seeing the movie was seeing my friends and seeing the great things people were doing. So we have with us on the panel Adonis Williams, who most of you won't recognize because he was like a little boy when that was filmed, and you can see he's grown up. And we have Helina Piper, his mother, here. She was also in the film. We have Bill Moyer from the Backbone Campaign, and we have Abby Brockway from the Delta 5 Action. So we've got a great panel of folks here. And I have a bunch of questions kind of pre-prepared that I'm going to be asking the panelists. But if you have questions that you know were kind of left burning in your heart from watching the movie, I invite you to start putting them in the chat box, and I will eventually get to those and start asking those questions. So the first question that I have goes a little bit to how the movie was organized. So historians always have arguments about, do we focus on the actor, the person who makes things happen, or do we focus on trends and cultural influences and you know, the underlying things that make history happen? And our movie producer made the choice to go really personal with the movie, to really zero in on a few people's stories and go in depth with them. And I think the personalness of the movie was one of the things that made it so appealing, but it does a little bit block out how much goes on in movements to make them happen. And so I'm going to ask each of our panelists to talk a little bit about, you know, particularly your part that was shown in the movie. What were some of the connections to other groups, other people that were part of what you were doing, and what were some of the sort of background pieces that were happening? What were some of the tasks that other people were having to do in order for the thing that you were doing to have to happen? And I think I'm going to start with Abby.
Wow, I could name a lot of people and groups. And I feel lucky to be interacting with most of these groups. I was honored to be at the trial of the kids, and just how well spoken they were, and just so impressed with that whole litigation and how powerful that was. And at Shell No, I mean, you know, many of the folks here are working in it in this climate group and activities. And I just feel like it was, unfortunately, they can't follow everyone, because I think we all have stories of how we came into this work, and we're so deeply interconnected. And I think the people that helped the Delta 5, you know, were probably 30 or 40 people, not including the people that witnessed it on the bridges and held the signs. And it's just amazing how and weird it is for someone like me to all of a sudden be in the spotlight and asked to be a spokesperson when maybe that's not my best thing that I do. So I felt I felt a great responsibility to like represent everyone that's, behind the scenes and quietly doing their work. And I just feel so lucky to be with you all in the work that we're doing together.
Thanks, Abby. Helena, some people might say that you're one of those behind the scenes people. What would you say about this question?
Um, I it's a hard one. And everything. I
Can
mean,
you speak
all
up a
the
little? Can you speak up a little?
oh yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
It's a hard one here. I mean, all the people in this area, I think, there was a lot of connection. Michael Foster started Plant for the Planet, which we got involved in. The kids did, and there was a lot of, supporting so many different organizations. We worked with 350. We did the, stop the oil trains. We were, out in kayaks with Backbone and doing all that stuff. So there's just so much work that goes in and so many things. And most of what I've done is try to support the boys and the kids and the different organizations that I can. And so I think I think I think an important thing maybe to take away from that is that you don't have to be the person up on stage talking. You don't have to be, you know, not everybody has a role to play. And even the small roles are significant. They all add up. The person who brings food or helps figure that out, makes helps make it happen too. It takes a community, and it takes a broad. So there's small things that everyone can do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that answer. Um, Adonis, your mom just mentioned Plant for the Planet, and that was one of the things that I was sort of sorry that the movie didn't make more clear. Like they talk about Michael and they talk about your case, but there's this connection between Michael, Plant for the Planet, and your case. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So Plan for the Planet Seattle, which was started by Michael Foster, is a branch of a larger international organization that focuses on climate justice through planting trees and in educating young people so they can become climate ambassadors and help spread the word, help educate people, and help promote action in their own communities. And Plan for the Planet is how both Audrey and I first really got started in the movement as a whole. Both of us had already had plenty of information about sort of like what climate change was, but neither of us had an avenue to sort of make action to affect change. And Plan for the Planet really sort of started that. I think the sort of through line between Michael and the case and Plan for the Planet was like the bridge between us youth, Our Children's Trust, and which is the organization that helped us sort of start the case, which started as a petition, then moved into a case. But yeah, they were the impetus for a lot of our involvement as a family, really.
Yeah, thank you. Bill, what do you want to say to this question?
Well, I think that we all grew into this work together. In 2012, Shell had their rig in Seattle, but nothing happened. And so, you know, I kind of think it's fun that we all are mentioning Michael Foster, who's not actually with us tonight, but Michael reached out because he was a teacher at a school, and he reached out to Backbone Campaign, and because they were trying to figure out, well, how do we do an Earth Day event? And I think it was Plant for the Planet that was doing that first Earth Day thing where we took over the park at Pike Place Market, and we made a priority that only youth or Indigenous voices would get the microphone. And we prioritized like leading with vision and having the youth at the forefront. And so I think that was a really interesting moment. And that was actually, I think, pre-350 Seattle. I think that was when the artists we brought in were from Fremont Arts Council. And they and Backbone, we collaborated. We used the experiences that we've been accumulating. I mean, I think it's, again, we're all growing together. hopefully we maintain, and sometimes we don't, sadly, that journey together. But the we were just sharing lessons across our experiences, and so that evolved. And so the resistance to coal ports and then later oil trains made it so that when Shell decided to have bring their rig in 2015, that we had all this competency or capacity as a community. And people come into this in all kinds of different ways. Most people have jobs or go to school, or and so they need then organizations play a role as kind of like this connecting thread, or an organizational thread that connects the dots from one action to another. And it's a blessing, really, and a privilege to be able to, like, Backbone Campaign's been around now about 18 years. And I feel like that's the role we play, in a way, is bringing folks together. But even for Shell No, then, of course, there were 350 was emerging as an organization in Seattle, 350 Seattle. And Bion was an existing environmental justice organization. And then there were the canoe families, and then there were the relationships of building cultural competency around canoes and kayaks, and relationships with Cecile at the Duwamish tribe, and relationships with Alki kayaks. So to me, social movement power is all about relationship.
Yeah.
And we had done that work. And so we were ready for a moment that gave us an opportunity to do something really special for the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that answer. I'm going to ask people now about some specific stuff from their part that was covered in the movie, but that didn't get covered in the movie. So, Abby, in the movie, a number of references are made to the fact that the Delta 5 used the defense of necessity, but the movie never defines what the defense of necessity is. And so I will just say in a very general way, and then ask you to tell more, that this is a kind of defense that has existed in common law for forever, which basically says, like, if a house is on fire and you break in order to get the person out, and you get charged with breaking and entering, that you can claim innocence based on a greater necessity, the necessity to save the life of the person inside. And there have been attempts to use it politically before. It was often used in plowshare trials in the 80s. So I'm wondering, Abby, if you can tell people, you guys were the first ones to try to use it for a climate thing, and to just talk a little bit more about what that was like trying to use that, and to tell people a little more what happened in court with that, because it wasn't clear in the movie what happened.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Even so, our attorney was Jim Rowe, who decided that he was going to defend Rising Tide and even Greenpeace in any action that they took to defend them if they performed civil disobedience and needed to be defended. So we met with him before, and hypothetically, we couldn't tell him, but hypothetically said what we wanted to do. And even after we did it, he was so obsessed about, like, well, technically the trespass was, and we're like, no, we don't want to say anything except for we did this on purpose. We don't want to try to get off on technicality that they didn't post a trespassing sign or anything like that. So even he really had to stay focused when we decided that we wanted to make ourselves really vulnerable and have the people decide. We were hoping a jury of our peers would decide and really have to weigh and ask themselves the question, like, what are the greater harms, and really understand that these people were willing to go to jail. And in order to just answer that question, and the reason that that's important is that if that decision were made, it's a powerful tool in setting precedents, but also then going to the legislature and like it has a lot of moving the ball forward in a lot of different elements. And I can't remember what my point was. Let me think.
About getting to use it for the first time.
Oh, so we had to go to all these pre-trial and readiness hearings, which happened so many different times. And you had to sit there for like an hour to 2 hours in the courtroom for your turn. And the courtroom is full of, mostly because it's a criminal, it's a judge that hears criminal cases. It's mostly drunk drivers, marijuana charges, and basically that's mostly what we heard. And so like when they called us up and there's these 5 middle-aged white people that they announced that we blocked a train, everybody's like, what is going on? So that was really interesting. But we, in those tiny appearances, you start to try to feel how the judge is going to be, Judge Anthony Howard. And one time he couldn't be there because he was home with the sick kids. And I was like, yes, his wife was out working, but he stayed home with the kids. And it doesn't matter that he was a judge or anything like that. I just really like all these little things you try to say, oh, are they going to be favorable and open to what we're trying to do or what? So on the, a week before we went to trial, we argued that we wanted to try the necessity defense, and he said no. And the night before, we got a what do you call it when you reevaluate it? I forget what the legal term is, but motion to reconsider. And you could tell he was struggling with what to do, because we literally said we have no other defense. And I think he struggled with the fact that we weren't trying to just embarrass the courts or anything like that, or we really had respect for the court system. And, we promised that the trial would be tight and only a week long, and, made all this stuff. And he said, and so he was in his chamber for, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes. I don't know if he was like doing more research or what he was doing in there, but we're all just on pins and needles. And when he came out to reverse himself, he talked about his humility and that he was being vulnerable himself in taking the risk of letting us have a trial. And so I feel like that I might be getting off a little bit, but I just want to say that so many people were moved in this, and so many doors were opened. We had no expectations that it would all work out. And I think I felt the pressure of that just because I had so much respect and I felt so lucky to be where we were. And so there was a lot of anxiety about that all falling in our laps.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. I just want to add, because it wasn't entirely clear in the movie, the judge allowed them this defense, but said they would have to meet 4 criteria for him to allow it in the end. And then on the last day before jury instructions, he said, well, you didn't meet the 4th criteria. And so jury, disregard everything that you've heard for the necessity defense. But
so I just want to say that one criteria was that there was more we could have done. So you haven't exhausted all of the things.
Right.
And I really, really regret, because the point was that I think the reason we got the necessity defense was because time is running out. And so folks that have tried this years and years before, it's kind of like, now we know it's so imminent. So the imminency is there, but also I don't feel like I made it clear. Well, I did with the executive branch, but the legislative branch, I kind of like talked about, I wasn't giving up on it. So he felt like, oh, maybe there's a possibility. And the one thing I really regret saying is that the senator, head of the environmental committee in Olympia, got in trouble for dining too many times with the oil industry. And the person that that pointed that out was actually in the courtroom. So it was like, I don't know, I just, all of these like things that didn't happen because I had so much anxiety. Although the other 4 did amazing, it wasn't like I do feel like I didn't do my part, but anyway, that's
Abby, I have to say, there is always more we can do. So if they throw that in as a criteria, it can never be met, you know. Adonis, can you tell us a little more of what's happened with the case? Because the movie kind of leaves us off at 2015, and there's actually 2 cases, one against the state of Washington and one against the federal government, which that wasn't entirely clear in the movie either. So can you give a little update?
Yeah, so for the federal, not for the federal case, for the Washington State case, which is the one that I'm part of,
There's
it,
been 3 cases.
what was that?
There's been 3 cases. There's 3 cases.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Because so I'll explain that. So for the Washington State case / cases, what I don't entirely remember where the movie left off on because it has been ages since I watched it.
That's okay.
But we ask that the Department of Ecology make a ruling that's going to lower carbon emissions. And so like just condensing it down, we ask that they make this ruling that's going to lower carbon emissions. We go to the court. The court's like, yeah, you have to make a ruling. The court's like, yes, you have to make a ruling, but also this isn't, it's a lot has happened. It's been like 9 years of case. And I'm not entirely caught up with where it is now. But basically what happened is the first case kind of didn't do anything. It was like, you don't have the right standing here. You didn't file it really in the right way. So we can't do very much. And so a second case started, which wasn't just against the Department of Ecology, it was against the entire Washington State government. And that's the case that we're in right now. And not a lot. I mean, like nothing really has changed. It's just been like so much like background work and like so much respect to Andrea Rogers, who is our attorney. But like, there's been sort of like meetings of just about like tons of things. But I think one thing that's really slowed it down has been quarantine. The past 16 months have been entirely virtual for pretty much everything. And so it's kind of come to a standstill as far as like actually being able to physically go do stuff. So it's like mountains of paperwork in the hopes of things get done is what it feels like. I'm sure my mom or my brother couldn't explain
yeah,
the
Helena,
federal case better.
You want to jump in, Helena?
Well, so it started, it started out, they had petitioned Ecology to agree simply to use the most current science in their recommendations. And Ecology said they have no legal obligation to use science in their carbon emissions regulations, which is crazy. What's the Department of Ecology? They don't have to use science. And they did that because Ecology had made its own statement that they were using science from, I think, 2008, and they weren't meeting those goals. And they said they need to do more. And so these kids went to them and said, well, can you agree to use the most current science in your recommendations? And when they denied that, they went to the court, and that is the beginning of the case, was these kids against the Department of Ecology's. And it turned into, instead of them asking for Ecology to agree to acknowledge that they need to use current science, it kind of shifted into Ecology needing to make a rule to reduce carbon emissions. And I think that was part of Ecology's strategy. It went back and forth. And their case actually got some foundational rulings that set up a foundation of precedent for the federal case, because the judge actually acknowledged that their rights were being violated and that that climate change was this, this danger, and all of these precedents were set. And so Washington made a clean air rule, which is a joke, and it doesn't meet
Yeah.
any of those things. And they were able to evade, the whole agreeing to use science and having that in the case. And but because of the rulings that the judge made and what the judge said in that, they were able to go back and then sue the state of Washington and the governor on a constitutional basis. And while the state ecology case was happening and they were getting these rulings, the federal case began, and on a constitutional basis. And so that was going, and then it turned into the state case. The state case, the judge refused to hear any of the claims and just dismissed it. And our lawyer said it was a horrible ruling, and so it's in appeals to the state Supreme Court. And that's kind of just, it's just going really, really slow. And then the federal case has, it was just unprecedented how many times they tried to dismiss it. They tried to use the writ of mandamus a number of times. It's been in the Ninth Circuit. It was dismissed, saying that they didn't have standing, but it's not dead. They're now, right now they're talking about going into settlement with the Biden administration. And so that's kind of like where it's working towards.
That seems rather significant if it would go into settlement.
Yeah.
I have to say,
the most recent thing that happened is 15 Republican states requested to sign in as, can't remember the term. I don't think it's interveners, but they want to sign in as interests in negotiation. They don't want the government to be able to negotiate a settlement without their input, because they feel that any settlement that was made could significantly impact their energy system or their economy. So there's 15 all Republican states that are trying to, get involved in this and fight any settlement.
So you can smell the fear, huh?
Yeah, a ruling in favor of the youth would require a drastic change to our energy policies and our subsidies, and
right, yeah.
States that whose economy is based on oil or coal, or they'd have to do something different.
Yeah. So Bill, I want to ask you to talk more about kayaktivism itself. Many people have described the whole Shell No fight as a sort of, David against Goliath size battle. And, it did end, which I think the movie also didn't talk about this, with Shell giving up on their summer attempt to, collect enough data to go forward. And so, yeah, just kind of what's your take about what was really made a difference about that whole kayaktivist activity? Oh, your mic seems off, even though it says it's not.
There we go. Here we go.
Okay.
How's that? Yeah. Well, it was 2009 when Backbone Campaign worked with our community on Vashon to used kayaks as part of protest against an industrial gravel mine out here. And it was during that time that I realized, wow, there's something really special about getting people on the water in the place that they love, dependent upon each other for their safety, but also connecting to the place that transcends a lot of other kind of typical tactics that we use. And so Backbone Campaign started like developing a curriculum, and we would teach kayaktivism, or we wouldn't call it that. We're just using kayaks, water protest, you know? Um, and so when there were the protests at the Seattle's port, I called up the people who were organizing that and say, well, what would it be like? Would it be okay if we did some on water protest? Because this could be a really great opportunity for that. And they said, sure, go for it. We're maxed out in what we're doing. So, you know, one, I just want to just clarify, this is a movie about people's personal experience and their journey. So it's like, there's this, and you're fleshing out the like very important, like tactical and legal things, but you know, I also want to honor that, you know, Abby said something earlier about not feeling like she was like, feeling all this responsibility or whatever, but I think it was the magic and the vulnerability of getting to see people's like family experience and the sacrifices and challenges that happen there that are key to this movie. I just want to just put that on the shelf there. But in terms of kayaktivism, you know, so when Shell No started to, it wasn't called Shell No, right? We had to come up with that. We came up with this idea, Shell No. That's clever, right? And but we talked to Cecile Hansen, the head of Duwamish, because I had a relationship with her, and I talked to Alka Kayak's manager, Greg, and I had a relationship with him already. And it just kind of, those sorts of things worked out. There were people, the truth about kayaktivism is that, you know, a lot of us have had the privilege of being on the water in the place that we love our whole life. And a lot of people have not had that privilege. So there was resistance to us utilizing that venue for a protest, because there are issues of accessibility. So certainly we did everything we could do to remove what obstacles we could around that, like financial obstacles. So there was never really a financial obstacle to getting on the water, but that doesn't mean that someone's going to feel comfortable doing that. So there was tension between on land and on water. Like, why are you guys doing this stuff on the water? And you know, I think we operate in a very complex reality where we're having to fight these fights with the tools we have, and different people are coming with different tools, and it's complex, and it triggers a lot of trauma and exposes a lot of inequality. So it was not without complication. That said, I would definitely side with the importance of connecting with the place that you love, and being in community with other people in that struggle, and the beauty of operating in a space that the authorities aren't feeling really comfortable and practiced at squelching your resistance, and that captures the imagination and the love of the people that you need in that public audience. So, and Shell ended up going to Alaska, and they did their drilling. But the thing that I want to share about that I don't think very many people know is that we were building up to a real blockade. And we realized that we couldn't get people to do that until they practiced in a family-friendly, unescalated experience where they weren't at risk. It's a lot already to be on the water. To be on the water and be under threat of being arrested, that's a lot more emotional, and it's actually more dangerous, right? So there's that aspect. So honoring the power of nature, and we had to practice, and we had to create opportunities to practice and show people that they could blockade. They could have this David versus Goliath moment. Ironically, is we didn't end up getting to do that, mostly honestly because of Greenpeace sort of grandstanding. But yeah. But we did get the photo of people looking like they were doing that. And that photo ended up being on the front page of like the Washington Post or New York Times or something. And we know that a person from a foundation's community went to the White House to talk to Obama's team about his upcoming trip to the Arctic, because he wanted to be the climate president. And they were very upset because they threw down this front page of this paper with all of these people looking like they're blockading this rig. And they're like, what are we going to do about this? And it turns out that there was this rule called the Walrus Rule, which was that there couldn't be two drilling sites closer than 15 miles apart during walrus migration. And so this just motivated them to enforce this rule that they were ignoring. So that removed 50% of Shell's drilling that summer. And then, as people may remember, a lot of the footage is from Portland, where there was a icebreaker. Remember, because the BP oil spill happened and they had that cap. Well, the icebreaker had the cap on it to plug the leak if there was a leak. And the icebreaker in Dutch Harbor, like miraculously, got a like 3-foot slice in the hull from some junk in the harbor. And so it had to go back, and they didn't go back to Seattle, which we thought was because of us, but it was actually because the biggest dry dock is in Portland. So they went to Portland. And then when we blockaded that and brought all the things that we had learned collectively, and I'm saying collectively in Seattle, but also over time from years, right? That we brought that to Portland. We and then Greenpeace did the beautiful, excellent action of rappelling from the bridge. And we got people on the dock chanting, "Stop that boat, stop that boat." We shifted the political calculus. We made what Shell used as the, they called it regulatory uncertainty, which meant that it was politically unsupportable for them to do this action in the Gulf, in the Arctic. And they could see that that tide was turning. And so regardless of whatever results they got, I think they would have exited after spending like $8 billion. And then it was after that that Obama rescinded any future leases. So there were all these little steps, and it was ironic that we didn't have to actually stop things in order to shift the political calculus. You think of politics as the art of the possible and calculus as the mathematics of changing variables. We shifted the variables to make what seems like inevitable impossible, politically impossible. And so it's a very complex story, but honestly, I think it's a very telling and beautiful and important story for us to remember for future fights.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad we have that recorded. You did a very succinct, I think, telling just there about, as you say, the complexity of pieces that piece together to make a social change shift happen. And the one thing I would add to that is, the summer window for drilling is really very short in Alaska. So they had a very short time frame. And when they took that ice rig down to get it fixed, I mean, people were like dismayed. Oh, we only delayed it for 2 days. But that was a 2 days they absolutely needed. And they did not wind up with enough time for their drilling to get the data they were supposed to get. So again, all these pieces, kind of fit together, including, I feel, Mother Nature weighed in. I think she ripped a ice rig, frankly. So anyway, so Bill has rightly pointed out that this movie is a very personal movie, and I am going to ask some personal questions now. So Abby, one of the things that didn't get explained in the movie was why you and Michael did not tell your spouses that you were about to commit civil disobedience. Would you explain to the audience why that's actually common practice?
So that again was a recommendation by our attorney in just planning, in that conspiracy can happen, and especially it seems like a paranoid type of action, but our movement got so large, just collectively, all the different things that we had, that I think sometimes you can be made an example of and drag people that are, you know, not intending to be in that situation, get charges and things like that. And
Sure, like Michael's camera person got charged and no one thought that would happen. He was supposed to
yeah.
be dressed.
So, so, I mean, I took it really personally because my family knew that, well, I had mentally been in this space where with the Pledge of Resistance that was happening with the Keystone Pipeline, nationally, 100,000 people had pledged to risk arrest if the Keystone Pipeline situation happened. So I was already in that space and helping to organize the Seattle group for that to happen. And honestly, it was such a powerful threat that Obama slow played it so that it would not happen, because that would just be too powerful. And it was one of those other things where we heard from the larger organizers that Obama knew about this and said, oh, great, this is happening. And so I think that in Seattle, with the power that was happening and all these projects that galvanized us. I mean, one thing I want to go on a tangent about is I think some of the threats that have happened in the Pacific Northwest is the thing that solidified us all and got those relationships stronger and caused us to go outside our comfort zones and learn new skills. And honestly, I think personally in the trial, when I testified, when the prosecutor asked me questions, I was so much more at ease because I'm used to being on defense, whereas offense, I feel like now we're trying to pivot to what does the Pacific Northwest, I mean, we don't just always want to go to jail and resist and say no. Like, once you get organized, how do you then have a movement where people that are not wanting the negativity, but want to join the positive thing that they're looking towards? So I feel like we're in this space where we're wanting to shift to that, and we're not very good at it. We're better at the defense than the offense. And so I feel like we're starting to head in that way.
Yeah, thank you. So when Abby said conspiracy can happen, she meant conspiracy charges can happen. And that used to actually happen in the 80s and 90s. They would try to charge people's support team or whatever with conspiracy charges. And so to protect family members, people sometimes don't tell them what's about to happen. So Helena, you have been the single mom of two boys who were part of a lawsuit. It gets mentioned in the movie that there was even death threats made at one point against Aji. And I'm sure there's people out there who say, wow, you had a full plate to begin with. How did you make this decision to let your boys be in the lawsuit and to support them through what was some pretty hard stuff?
It didn't really feel like a decision that I weighed. It was more, when I don't know, I think I try to live and I tried to raise them with a sense of just connection to the world. And so with that, like, what is community? What is civic responsibility? What is, like, how do you look around and see things going wrong in your world and not feel like it's like if you walk through your room and there's something on the floor, you pick it up and like, I don't see that this like disconnect between our personal home lives and like the greater, for me, it's all, part of a, we're all part of one world. And so, we were volunteering, doing, forest restoration with Nature Consortium, and we would volunteer at the food bank. And, I always had this like, yeah, we could technically look at it and say like, I'm a single mom and we're poor and we're broke and we're this and that, but we also, we have so much, and we can always, we can always do something to give and to try to make our community stronger and try to, like we have a responsibility to. And so it was kind of out of that vein. And, it just happened that through getting involved with Plant for the Planet and stuff, though, that's what our opportunity to give kind of became, and where we focused that. So it didn't feel like a choice, really. It felt like just what should be, if you can, you should do something.
Well, thank you for being that kind of a mom.
Thanks.
Adonis, I know you said you watched the movie quite a while ago and you don't totally remember, but they've got some pretty personal stuff in there for you and your brother. They have you fighting over a chess game and you coming home off the ferry and your mom's crying and stuff. Any thoughts you want to share about that? I mean, how do you feel about the camera people getting that in your business?
I have no problem with sort of like being recorded, and I have no problem because I mean it was true, and more so it's just like it was a really great chance because it came out, the movie itself came out a while after all that stuff happened. It came out like minimum a couple of years after like those events actually took place.
Yeah.
For me to both reflect on how much I had grown from the person I was then, because I, in many veins, despise Adonis from 2016 or from 2020. Like, little me was a egotistical, entitled, arrogant, like angry entity
I
that
just
didn't
want
know
you
what to
to,
do with
I
himself.
just want you to know you didn't look that way to me. I felt like you had a right to be mad about the chess game situation.
It's but it was a great chance to reflect on how much I'd grown, and really analyze the person I was when I watched the movie. And sort of every time I think about it, it's like how am I doing? What is the person I want to be? And if I were to be in a documentary and thousands of people were to see the person I am now, would I be fine with that? Would I be okay with the person that I present other people personally on a day-to-day life being presented to thousands of people? Would that be fine with me? And so it's like being able to see yourself like really truly in that light is great for introspection, is what I would say.
Well, that's a great answer. I think that should be an inspiration to all of us. Are we living in a way that we would be proud of tomorrow, or a year from now? Yeah. Similar kind of question, Bill. There was a lot of discussion in the movie about you as a parent, you being gone, you doing activism, etc. Anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my daughter, there was a review in the Guardian. It said, "Oh, this guy, it doesn't matter how many times he shows up and makes your breakfast, he'll never repair the damage done." I was like, that was like such the wrong reading of the actual thing that happened. I think I learned from other people's. I had the benefit of other people's experience, and I also had the privilege of this being my job, and so the I was at a retreat of a leadership development retreat at one point, and there was a story about someone who was not able to show up for their child because of their obsession with their passion at their work, and I don't think that's exclusive to activism, by the way, and until that child no longer expected them to show up, and so that's when I made a pledge to my daughter early on to make her breakfast every morning. So, it was a great thing for me. I really, I never forced my daughter to come to protests, and I made her breakfast every morning. And I don't know, I think I got lucky. She seems okay.
Yeah.
she still wants to hang out.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, knowing a lot of you in the film, I mean, Abby has an amazing bond with her daughter, and yeah, I don't think that the, movie necessarily showed that, but, and it's very clear to me that the Piper Williams family is extremely bonded with each other. And so, I mean, that's just part of the cool fabric of all this.
And what I would love for the takeaway to be is not how damaged the children are, but is that how important our families are. And it's just like you say, there's all these other groups that participate. For me, that's my entire community that supports and helps build the tools and things that we do. But also, how important is my wife and my daughter in the work that I do? It's not that it's like this competition, it's like a system that works together to get stuff done. And no, but not everybody has to do the same thing, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And please don't all do the same thing. Like, let's all do the things that we love and and passionate about and support each other through that. So I think if anything, it's to like, let's say Esther's awesome. My wife, Esther, is awesome. She has made sacrifices, but they're not terrible, right? It's been a negotiation. And I need her to be balanced in ways that she needs me to show up in other ways. We all need each other to show up in the ways that we can. And the ways that we show up are unique and important.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to be a freaking activist. Please,
Yeah.
for God's sakes, don't all become activists.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. That was a great answer. I'm starting to look at the ones in the chat, and if people have been holding ones, you better get them in the chat. So one of the ones in the chat wants to know what Adonis is doing now. And I would add to that, Adonis, is there any particular way you're trying to do activism now, or are you just being a student now? Or tell us what you're up to.
A lot of my activism has shifted into something that I'm very happy with, and that is art. I just recently provided the design. I made the design for a street mural that was against a pipeline that's going straight through Annie's hummingbird territory. And before that, like during the summer of the pandemic, I helped work on a project that was a street mural for Black Lives Matter. It was Black Lives Matter across the street in the junction in West Seattle. And sort of an ever-present thing that I'm doing that's just specifically related to activism is just talking to people and learning. Like it's something that is connected to everything in our lives. And so the conversation will always come up at times. And putting my experience, especially, with school, putting the experience that I have as an activist and as a public speaker and sort of as a youth, as a minority who's sort of like affected and has been affected and has affected the movement in class discussions and in the work that I produce in school, in helping sort of shed my perspective has been really cool to me. And then beyond that, I've been doing art, like is what a lot of my time is. I'm taking a digital photography class right now, and sort of living my life as best as I can.
And tell us quickly what Aji is doing also.
Aji is a solar electrician right now, is what his profession is.
That's great. Thank you. Abby, what's kind of your focus of attention these days?
Well, you and I are working with Faith Action Climate Team, and I think it's evolved a little bit into kind of the spiritual connection of this work. And the people that are in the group are from different faith communities and are passionate about the environmental work that we have to do, but also dealing with just facing the facts of how difficult it is and kind of the long-term outlook. And we've become kind of a group that lifts and buoys each other, and also can share what they're doing within their faith communities and work on smaller projects. Before that, we actually did a service, a prayer service in a bank when the funding happened for, we're putting pressure on divesting, getting banks to not invest in these fossil fuel projects. So we were at the Bank of America, and a customer came in while we were in a circle, and some of us were reading poetry. Sometimes we prayed. We sang a few songs while Lynn was negotiating with the bank manager and letting them know why we're there. And the customer came in and was like, wait, is this a church service? I thought this was a bank or something like that. And it was just so thrilling for us to feel like we did transform that space and take it over in a certain way. So I think focusing on that spiritual part of this struggle has been really helpful. And then I'm just working in my church, getting my faith community activated. And it's a difficult process, especially since there's so many social justice issues, and also just educating the fact that they're all interwoven in an important way. But sometimes I feel like in my faith community, we're adding band-aids rather than looking at the root systems and addressing those, because I feel like a lot of faith communities apply the bandages, and so people don't think there's a problem. And it's when we stop doing that and we look at the structural problems, I think that's been helpful.
Thanks, Abby. Bill, you want to tell about your cutting edge? You might want to tell people about Solutionary Rail. You're muted. Muted. Oh, I think he is saying he can't speak right now.
There we go.
Oh.
Sorry about that. I was trying to turn down the glare. We have been working on, about the time of Shall Know, we did this book called Solutionary Rail, which was, we were challenged by some of the railroad labor folks who were sitting at panels with Peabody Coal and BNSF. And we said, really, is that the highest role of the railroads in the society, to like ship our in these fossil fuels over to China, including also ship the factories over to China, and then only to like acidify the oceans and then re-import the stuff back? So they gave us, a guy named Mike Elliott gave us a paper, a 2008 paper on modernizing the Northern Corridor. I didn't know what the Northern Corridor was. So we had to go through this whole process of learning about railroads and freight railroads. So we are putting a lot of energy, and have put a lot of energy into reimagining what it is that connects us. What's the infrastructure that encourages resilience and can be decarbonized and allows for localization. So what's the infrastructure that we want? And Solutionary Rail looks specifically at freight railroads and moving trucks, freight off of trucks and onto trains, electrifying trains in the US, and using rail corridors for the transmission of renewable energy. The thing I love most about this is that it transcends a lot of wedge party politics stuff, and it gets people into conversation. So I can have conversations with farmers in Kansas, or facilitate communication between tribes and environmental justice activists, or railroad labor and EJ activists. So small towns and urban places. Like, what I love about rail is that it connects, literally and figuratively connects us all. And so that's been a big part of my work, and I enjoy that a lot. And I've worked a lot with environmental justice. I prefer to work these days with community-based organizations, primarily people of color-led community-based organizations, working on impacts of climate, and that includes also Indigenous organizations. So like last week, I was out projecting on the Snake River dams with the Nimipu Protectors for the Environment. So that's the work that I'm doing these days, and thanks.
Thank you, Bill. So Helena, what's on top for you these days in terms of what you see happening or want to have happening for the movement?
I think we've been kind of stalled. I was working in a restructuring committee for climate action families, talking about, yeah, yeah, how do you support families with young children and families in kind of envisioning how we live different and how we embrace these really difficult things that are coming our way and are happening right now, because there's a lot to grieve and there's a lot of that can be really traumatic about the reality of what we're facing and what we're going to face, and there's no way we're going to escape that, and we have to adapt and learn and change, and we have to re-envision, like how do we structure communities, what does sustainable look like, what does interconnected look like, and and how do we build that into the education of our young people when we are not living in sustainable ways and sustainable societies with sustainable processes. And so I think I don't have those answers. It's something that I've been working on and thinking about, and just in the organizations that I've been part of, thinking about, how where do we focus our energy and where do we go with that. And COVID's kind of put a kind of a hold on a lot of the in-person workings that we would do in community building and stuff. And so, and then I'm still working 50 hours a week and trying to hold everything together. So, and trying to also think about, like, how do I keep myself healthy and balanced and do that. There always feels like I should be doing so much more. And I think a lot of people probably feel like that, like there's just like these problems are so huge and I don't do enough. But I also know that, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. I think you're naming all the right things and calling all the right things out. I really appreciate it. So it's 10 after, so we've been going at this for an hour. I have an endless supply of questions. I could talk to these people for another hour, but it's late and it's hot, and probably some of you have some other ideas for the evening as well. So I think we're gonna wrap up, and I'm glad we have this recorded because I'm gonna send the recording to the other half the people who signed up but didn't make it here tonight. It's also going to be the movie producers put all the panels that have been held about the movie on their website. So it'll also be on there. And so hopefully some people in Montana will get to hear all the great stuff you guys shared. So I want to ask all of the audience members to please unmute your microphones for a minute so that we can have a very good, nice round of applause for our wonderful speakers. Okay. Yeah, and I really feel very appreciative that you guys took time out of your lives to come be on the panel, especially when we're such a panel. So thank you, and I'm going to be just sort of hanging out in this space. If anybody else feels like hanging out, we'll do a little hanging out, but I'm going to free our panelists to go on with it. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
You're welcome. It's great to see you guys.
Hope all of you have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night, all.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, the movie was great too.
So is there some kind of trajectory for the movie itself? I gather it's winning awards. What's the story for the movie?
Yeah, it's so sad because the producer got cancer, which slowed down the production of it, and his son had to finish the production of it. And then they had it all ready to go, and then the pandemic happened, so they haven't been able to have in movie theater release of it. And so this is how they've been doing it, is having little political groups do screenings like this one. And but it has won a number of documentary awards in international contests, so that's pretty cool. Abby, anything you want to add about that?
No, actually, just if you like the film, just circulate it around to your friends, especially in the Pacific Northwest. We've shown it a lot because a lot of people have know people that are in it. And what's interesting is that there's a huge following in England. I think a lot of people are watching it in the UK with
Extinction Rebellion.
Extinction Rebellion, which it's funny because they think we're doing such great work, but I mean, I feel like they're leading the charge and really are just doing amazing things. But it's been nice to have that relationship with them as far as getting to hear what they're doing. And what I've learned so much is that they do see what we're doing. And I don't know that we all pay attention to globally what's happening and what people are doing. So that's just reminded me to pursue that. It's harder, I think, in our media in America, because we're so America centric, that you really have to, I mean, we all have outlets that we can see these things ourselves, but it's just so thrilling to see what's happening and know that, work's being done all over. So
Yeah.
I also think that they had to do this particular kind of a release before they do streaming. And once they do streaming, they can't do the kinds of thing, the licensing for these showings that they're doing now. So I think that there is a step. And then obviously I think COVID made it more complicated, but I'm right there with Abby. I think that it's really amazing to be connecting and remembering that we're part of a global movement, and it's fun to connect with those folks. There's going to be a panel with folks in Sweden in a couple of weeks or something, I think. So yeah, it's neat to bring it down to the level of being able to have the conversation. I mean, how many films do you go to? Do you get to then be able to have a conversation?
I know,
right? Gives it so much more meaning, really, to me anyway.
yeah.
Lynn, you're still recording. Do you mean to be?
Oh, okay, I'll turn off the recording.